Hello, everyone, and welcome again to a live podcast of Another Woman's Story. We are an organization designed to assist women that have survived domestic violence. The goal of our organization, the primary goal of our organization, is to get the conversation, to continue the conversation, to not be afraid of the conversation, and to share the conversation with those who are still struggling in the situation and or need support to get on the pathway to get out and be free from domestic violence. So tonight we have a special guest, a friend of mine who has endured another situation with regard to domestic violence. She's here tonight to share her story. She's recovered. She's doing so many wonderful things. And her name is Kimberly Weeks. Without further ado, I'd like to bring her on. So Kim, welcome tonight. Good evening. Come on in the room. There
Hey,
you are.
hey, how you doing?
Hey, good. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm so excited. I've been watching you as you've done your other interviews, and we talked a while ago about having this
Oh
conversation.
my gosh. It's been a long time. We've been talking about it. So finally our schedules have meshed together. I'm so excited about our conversation tonight.
Yeah, super excited.
Yes. So Kimberly has a lot to share. We're going to get right into it. Kimberly, if you would you have the floor. And as always, this is going to be an organic conversation. You share whatever you want, but if you can just kind of give us a little bit of your history, kind of bring us to current, if you will.
Bring us up to speed. Okay.
Yes,
So, what has brought me to sharing my story has been, you know, going through a healing process over time and dealing with some things that took place in my own childhood, recognizing that I grew up in a family system that was, in many ways abusive, psychologically, emotionally, mentally. Many of us grew up in family systems there was some stuff going on behind closed doors that we didn't talk about in public. We're told not to talk about in public. And so, I was this kid that was growing up wanting, trying to find a sense of belonging and sense of family like most of us. And, didn't find it in my family of origin, didn't find a safe space in my family of origin. And so I started looking for it outside, looking for it in relationships with guys, and looking for it in accomplishment at school and all of those different things. Went to college. In my first semester of college, I got pregnant with my first child. He's 22 now. And then, again, that's an incredibly traumatic experience. Many people have taken place to become a mother at 18, 19 years old. And, I started going, okay, well, now I got to be an adult and started again having this overwhelming sense of wanting to have a family. And so everything didn't work out with the guy that I had, my first child with. I came to Atlanta to work right after college, got into the church world. And, I was in an environment where people were, talking about, having healthy families and having great relationships. And so it sunk with my soul. I was like, this is what I've been looking for. I was in a church environment where people were kind of like meeting and getting engaged in 4 or 5 months and then getting married by the end of that year. And so that's what took place for me. I got married in 2004 to a person I really didn't know, and I didn't know myself. And I hadn't dealt with all the things that I grew up with that were traumatic, that were things that were, affecting my ability to have mental stability and mental health. And so the marriage that I was in was narcissistic. It was a psychologically abusive environment. The person presented a mask, presented a person that they wanted me to believe was the real person, and it wasn't. That that person was not who they said they were. It was kind of like being in a con artist type situation. And once I got married and got pregnant with my second child, it was like, okay, well, I got to make this work now. So I went through the process of doing everything I could possibly do to meet that person's desires, to meet their, what they wanted out of the relationship. And, changing jobs, making more money, having more kids, getting a house, getting bigger houses, doing all the things to try to appease that person so that they would treat me well and so that they would have a relationship with me. And what I ended up discovering through that process was that I married someone that was exactly like what I grew up seeing. And so when you're in a narcissistic relationship, you're in a relationship with a person who's like a bottomless pit. They can't be satisfied and they can't be appeased and they can't be fulfilled or sustained in an intimate relationship. They're not looking for a connection that's genuine or authentic. They're looking to use people. They're looking to, have a relationship that's a using type relationship. So I went through 13 years of that marriage. It included all kinds of abuse, and ended up in the divorce process, going through financial abuse, going through, smear campaigning, which is when, your communications about you, about your ability to have, mental health, about whether you're crazy and all the rest of this stuff. I was basically labeled as this crazy person, and left that marriage, got through the divorce process, and shortly after that, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis.
Wow.
I had been having symptoms for 10 years, and I just didn't know what it was. I thought I was just stressed out. I thought I was up all night with babies. I thought I was taking on a lot of responsibility, and I was doing all those things, but there was something actually physiologically happening in my nervous system, and I developed these lesions on my brain. I developed lesions on my spine and on my brainstem.
Wow.
And so, all of that is a part of my story. It's a part of that part of every one of us that desires that authentic part of us, that desires connection, that desires to, have relationships that are authentic and wants to have peace and safety. And I've been seeking that since I was a small girl and trying to find it outside of myself.
Right.
I actually found it in the marriage, in the midst of absolute devastation and absolute abuse. I found it in God. For real,
Yeah.
for real. I grew up in the church, going to church 8 o'clock in the morning every Sunday, in my hometown. And I found the genuine, true, authentic, loving, parental, fatherly love. And I found it when I actually left church. And I left all of the traditions of church. And I developed a relationship with God for myself. And I watched him walk me out of what was pretty much a situation of bondage in my marriage. Yeah.
So that's a lot. That's a lot. I'm listening to what you're saying, and I have a few things I want to ask you.
Sure.
And going back a little bit, when you first started the relationship with your now ex-husband, were there any signs? Were there any friends that said, I don't know about this guy? I always ask my guests if there was any signs, if there was anything that, that you didn't pick up that your friend said or your parents may have said, or was there any signs like that someone said, something about this guy?
Absolutely. There were signs, and absolutely I saw them. But wow. I literally thought, first of all, there were signs that I didn't know what they meant.
Okay.
Okay. And there were also signs that were familiar. Again, I grew up in a family system and in an environment, we call it a marinade, a family system marinade, in which certain behaviors, certain ways of communicating, certain, ways of interacting relationally between a man and a woman were demonstrated to me. And so there were things that happened that were familiar, that were normal to me.
Okay.
If that makes sense. So yeah, there were some signs. There was things where I caught him in, lies. There were things that he said that he was, doing. I mean, little things that really didn't make much sense to lie about, that were, I was discovering. There was, instances in which I would try to just go along with my ever normal day, interactions at work or with my friends. And he was, pushing to have lots of time and attention from me, almost like the term in narcissistic abuse is called love bombing, where they kind of try to take over your life in terms of, having all of your attention, having all of your time, not giving you certain amounts of space and all the rest of that stuff. And you read that as, oh, this guy's really into me. He really likes me. He really wants to be with me. You don't see that as someone trying to literally dominate your mind, dominate your time and your thinking, and kind of pull you away from everything that you know, and have you like in an isolated, just you and them type of environment. That was what happened. Yeah. So yeah, there was a lot of little things that now I look back on. I remember when we were in our reception at our wedding, and it was the strangest thing. He literally, we were dancing and everybody was dancing, and he literally said, like almost like a nomad, like, like the cavemen, like, it's mine, and it was me, my body, my whatever. I don't know what it actually meant for him, but I remember it being the strangest thing, almost like I was now like some kind of piece of property of his or something.
Listen to me. So last month I had a podcast with someone, and we were talking about the wedding and were there signs and things like that. And the one thing that I told her was, I don't remember, for me, I didn't have any signs that were evident, but the night that we got married, when he looked at me and said, now you're my wife.
Yes.
That just raised the hairs on the back of my neck.
That's right. I literally was standing there like, it's like you, for a minute, get to see what image that they have presented to you pulled off, and you get to see the real person for just a minute.
Yeah.
That's what happened. And it was very strange. Again, I'm in the middle of my wedding. I'm kind of like, oh, well, maybe he's elated. Maybe, everybody's excited. But there are these snapshots of moments that I remember that were telling the story of what I was going to actually experience in the marriage.
Okay. So when you got to the place where things got to be too much, or were you able to have conversations with his family? Were they supportive of you? No.
Okay. So I had a family system, and he also had a family system. His family system behaviors like what was taking place were normal. It's what happened with his family, his parents. And so, in many instances, there's kind of a patriarchal concept that women are to be seen and not heard. They're to be attractive and not, get in the way. They're to be, they're at the disposal or use of their spouse. And that was kind of the environment that, I was supposed to be meeting his needs and meeting his, expectations and all of that stuff. So anything that happened in front of his family, and it was normal to them too.
Wow.
Yeah.
So was there ever a time where he became physical?
Yes, but not in a traditional. There was pushing, there was shoving, there was some sexual violence. But I never had a bruise or any, and that doesn't, excuse.
It's under the radar. It's under the radar.
Under the radar. Most of my abuse was mental. Put it this way, I have literal holes in my brain from the psychological battery that I experienced. So sometimes things are happening that are physically impacting, but the person doesn't hit you.
Yeah.
Your brain, when you go through narcissistic and psychological abuse, your brain changes.
Yeah.
Your brain becomes impaired. And I actually have physical evidence of that. Wow. It's like I have concussions.
Yeah.
If you look at my MRIs, it looks like I've had concussions.
And so what was the turning point? What was the thing that you said, enough is enough?
When he was sexually violated me.
Okay.
Yeah, that was it. Because I recognized at that point, A, it was intentional, and B, this person truly didn't see me as human. They saw me as an object, and they were treating me as such. And I have 4 boys that I was raising in this house, and I could not see myself allowing them to see that that is how a woman was to be treated and regarded. And I couldn't continue. And I say that I couldn't continue. It's like it woke me up.
Yeah.
It removed the veil of, oh, well, maybe try this. It removed the veil of maybe if I just, work on my counseling, maybe if I pray about it, maybe if I go talk to another pastor about it, maybe if we go through this conference, it just removed all of that, because it became so clear that the person didn't love me, didn't care about me, and didn't even see me as a human being.
That's horrible. That's horrible. And did you at some point invite the church to, because, we attended the same church. So did you at any point, was there counseling with regard to that? Did that help? Did that?
We had gone to multiple Christian counselors. We had talked to the pastor that we were under. The pastor that we were under at the time had seen abusive behaviors and actions and ways of being, psychologically, mentally, emotionally, verbally. We had gone to psychologists. We'd gone to marriage and family therapists. We had gone to, I was trying to get us to anybody and everybody to try to save the situation if possible. And it actually became a way that my ex was using scripture and what was being said by pastors about submission, about a woman, who is a nagging wife, it's better to be on a rooftop, all of that, using those things to continue abusing me, for lack of better term.
And that was not identified by the people who were counseling? They couldn't see through that?
No, and that's the thing, because narcissists do not show anyone that side. You get to see that side. Yeah. Certain people in their family system that have, it's normal, get to see that side. They get to see those actions and those behaviors, and they get to see you being devalued. They get to see the person saying one thing and doing another. They get to see how they, withhold and stonewall. They get to see all of that. But the people they're trying to impress, that they want to maintain an image for, they don't get to see that side of the person. They get the kind, amiable, altruistic, great person, great citizen. They get to see that person, and they cannot reconcile the image of that person with who they're telling them you go home to.
Yes.
They can't. And I've said it before. If I hadn't lived it, you could not have told me that this man behaved like that.
Right.
His mask was, they say that narcissists are incredible actors, and they are. But I remember in the dating, you asked the question, I remembered in the dating process, you asked the question, were there any red flags or any signs? I remember him saying to me, and I didn't understand what it meant, that he was a master at managing people's perceptions. I didn't know that meant he was a master deceiver.
Right.
I didn't know that meant he was a master manipulator.
But and what's really interesting about that, and not to cut you off, but that is exactly the part that can keep you trapped, because nobody believes it. So then you start to think, well, maybe it's not really, it's me, or it's not really happening, or it's just a trap. It's a trap.
The term is called gaslighting. What happens is you begin to be gaslighted
Yeah.
by the person who's abusing you, by the people who they are telling their story to. They provoke you to situations where you will have a reaction, and then they point the finger at you and say, look, I told you she was crazy, when they're doing things that are actually under the radar, provoking you.
Yeah.
And doing things that are hideous to you behind closed doors, and almost pushing you out in the public when you just had that interaction with them, and you're completely in shock. You're completely in a place of wounding, and you act weird because you just got assaulted verbally, emotionally, mentally, whatever it is.
But and on top of that, you still try to save face, right? So the person pushes you out there, and you still don't say, they did it to me, because you don't, one, believe that they're going to even believe that they did it to you, because they weren't saying anything, and you're all upset and riled up.
And you're all over the place.
Yeah.
And you try to save face because you don't know how to process and integrate. That's what the definition of trauma is. Trauma is anything that happens to you that's too fast, too much, too fast, too soon. You are literally in a state of trauma. And you can't process it. You can't integrate it. And you're public. You're in front of people, and they're looking at you like you're crazy, and you feel like you're losing your mind. Yeah. They call narcissistic abuse the crazy making kind of abuse, because they're messing with the internal part of your ability to have a grasp on what's real, what's happening in reality. And you lose your ability to understand what's going on the inside of you. Again, I have lesions in my brain now.
Wow.
Holes.
And so those pockets are those, the holes that you say, are those places where you have memory loss? Are they places where you have disconnect? What does that effect look like?
Cognitive impairment, brain fog, memory loss, fatigue. Like I used to fly for business weekly. There's a different kind of work that I have to do now, because certain environments will flare up symptoms. But it's a lot of just delayed processing. It takes me some more time to process information at times. And so literally I did there's a thing called the Young Stroke Victims in Atlanta, Georgia, that I did a presentation for. And these are people who've had strokes, and I have all the same symptoms that they have.
Wow. Because is that lost forever? Can you regain any of that, or is it?
Well, our brains, I became a trauma recovery coach because I wanted to figure out what the heck happened to me. And what I've learned about our nervous systems, about our brains, about the way that God designed our bodies, is that they're neuroplastic, meaning we can develop new neural pathways that help us function like nothing happened. And so you have to create an environment. You have to have a certain kind of, environment that's low stress, that doesn't have a whole bunch of chaos in it, that you eat well, that that's supportive of your body doing what it's designed to do, which is heal and repair itself.
What's really interesting about that is, and I've recognized for myself how important peace is, right?
Yes.
And the question that I have for you is, in that environment, you've created this space now that you have peace. What does that look like when you reintegrate into an environment that's not home? It doesn't necessarily mean that it's not peaceful, but how do you navigate through outside of your peace place, if that makes sense?
So the peace place used to be outside, but now it's inside.
Okay.
When you learn and you go through, trauma therapy, when you go through counseling, if you go through trauma recovery coaching, you start developing some ways in which to support your own nervous system real time. And so it started out leaving the abusive environment and having, the divorce process and going no contact with my ex-husband, which looks like me not having, any kind of face-to-face interaction with him, not having any phone calls where I'm auditorily hearing his voice.
Right.
Looks like not looking at images, getting rid of all of the reminders of him that I could possibly can. It looks like that type of no contact for
Like a complete disconnect.
Complete disconnect. Everything that we do for our children's in writing. And then it starts to look like, okay, now I have to deal with the fact that my nervous system is used to stress, is used to being dysregulated all the time. And so when you come off the chemicals that you're used to having released in your body, cortisol, adrenaline, dopamine, and that's releasing all the time when you're in that high stress situation and you develop something called complex PTSD, you actually develop PTSD symptoms. You have to go through a withdrawal in your nervous system from being used to being activated all the time into fight or flight and hypervigilance. And so once you go through that process, you literally, if you've watched New Jack City and Pookie went through his withdrawal with the shakes.
Right.
Okay. You literally go through a physiological, adjustment of your body getting used to not being in that activated, it's called the sympathetic nervous state, the activated nervous state. You have to get used to having calm. You have to get used to having peace. And over time, and it takes time, I'm 4 years out from this thing, you get to a place then where the peace is inside of you.
Okay.
It's not external, it's internal, but you have to do one first and then the next.
Wow.
Yeah.
So did you have to go through a series of counselors to get to the one that hit that nerve, if you will, or the one that was able to penetrate you to the place where those things that make sense now, did you have to go through a series of counselors where, okay, this person is not going to work, this person is just not going to work? Did you had to go through a couple of counselors or a few counselors before you got to the person that mattered? And is there a specific type of counselor that a person should go to? I mean, I know, at least for me, I'm thinking they at least need to be versed in trauma, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I was already in counseling. I had been in counseling for like 10 years, trying to figure out what was wrong, what was going on, what I could do. So I had been in what's called cognitive behavioral therapy with a marriage and family therapist for a really long time. Once the divorce was final, I had this diagnosis. I was like on a mission to figure out what the heck just happened to my body. Okay. Because it wasn't just, reading the Bible and praying and reading a psalm, and it wasn't just spiritual. This was a physical manifestation of the impact of what had just taken place. And so I ran across this post on somebody's Instagram, and it said that when a person experiences narcissistic abuse, they can develop diseases and chronic illnesses like autoimmune diseases.
I saw that. That
post, and the lady who signed it, her name was Bobby Parrish. I looked her up, and she had an association that she had just started called the International Association of Trauma Recovery Coaching, where she was teaching people about the impact of trauma on your physical body. So I went, oh my gosh, maybe this is it. And so I signed up for her program for me. I signed up so that I could understand what happened to me. Okay. Went through the program. My eyes were completely open. It was like all those years of therapy and all those years of counseling. I finally got, oh my gosh, this isn't just let's have a better relationship. This is me understanding my childhood, the trauma that happened in my childhood. Everything that I had been on a search for to understand was answered in this course. What my attachment style was and how that developed how I was relating in the marriage. what happens when you have they're called ACEs, adverse childhood events. What happens when you have, adverse childhood events, and how that affects your overall life health outcomes. And then just what do you do to support yourself as you are literally going into an environment to try to heal. And so I went and finished that, became a trauma recovery coach, and was like, all right, this is something that has been so beneficial to me. I want to offer what I'm learning to other people who have gone through the same thing that I've gone through, because I didn't have that person who had the language, who understood what was taking place, who could tell me what the person was doing in the situation so that I could understand it and get out of the web, so to speak, of all of their deception and manipulation. I was like, I've got to help somebody else understand what this is so that they don't have to go through 15 years.
Yeah. So here's the thing. So let me ask you this. So if you have had a childhood trauma, let's say, and as an adult, now you're an adult, how do you bring about that particular event so that the person can now begin to heal? One, they may not recognize that there's something that happened. Two, they may have buried it. All they know is that they respond when something comes up.
So all they know is that there are triggers.
When a bird fly, or whatever that is. You know what I mean? Yeah. How do you get that person to navigate from this happens to me and I don't know why? They'll say something like that. How do you transform that thought or memory so that they can begin to heal from that?
So I believe mental health professionals are best equipped to support people who have experienced traumas. And trauma is what they call in the eye of the beholder. What may be traumatic for me may not be traumatic for you. And so if people have an awareness, the first thing is you always have to have an awareness that there are these things that are happening and they continue to happening repeatedly as patterns in relationships. It's happening in my body. I'm having a physical activation. I'm having a physical reaction to certain words, certain phrases, certain scents, certain smells, certain environments, whether I have certain reactions around men, whether I have certain reactions around people in authority. And once you have the awareness that there's a trigger, my belief is that there needs to be a mental health professional, whether that is a trauma therapist, whether that's a licensed professional counselor, whether that's a certified trauma recovery coach, someone who is, you ask the question, who should you be looking for? Someone who's trauma informed and trauma trained.
Okay.
Someone who has the ability to understand how a traumatic event impacts your physical body and what happens in your nervous system when that happens, and what tools and resources you need to be able to start to process and release that traumatic stored energy from your body. Because as long as it remains in your body, anytime that there's something that's a reminder of it, your subconscious mind and your nervous system is going to respond.
Right.
It's not even in your thinking brain. It's happening automatically.
So, and I think about what I had to recognize for myself, right, is what is uncomfortable for me,
right,
doesn't have to be uncomfortable for anybody else.
Right.
Because I feel like when you try to push past what is uncomfortable for you, once you come out of that, and you try to normalize things that really are traumatic or things that really bring up a trigger, then you create just as much damage as if you were still in it, because you're not saying, you're not expressing, and you don't escape. You're in the same kind of whirlwind, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. We call it cues of danger to your nervous system and cues of safety to your nervous system. We all have things that came out of that first 5 to 7 years of life that taught our bodies and our nervous system who and what's safe and who and what is not.
Okay.
And when we have things that are cues of danger, you'll have a trigger. You'll have a your nervous system will respond. And we want it to. This is how God created our bodies to operate in this fallen world, because there are things in the world that are dangerous. And so the part of our brain that's what's called the frontal lobe, which is our executive functioning part of our brain, is not what activates when there's a cue of danger. The subconscious part of us that is stored in that part of our brain called the amygdala that activates and starts to either mobilize us to take action or shut us down to collapse because it's so overwhelming to our nervous system. Whatever the situation is, it's not happening consciously. So we have to learn how to honor and pay attention to what our body is telling us.
Yeah.
Which for many people who've experienced trauma and domestic violence, we have detached and dissociated from our bodies because the body was the site of the abuse.
Yeah.
So we call it gut instincts. We call it intuition. You know, some people will say it's the spirit of God communicating through our senses. But what survivors have to learn to do, what they get to learn to do, is to start to pay attention to the cues that their body is communicating and to respect it, honor it, and go seek help to support themselves.
Right. And listen to it. I know that once we stop listening to it,
that's right,
everything else takes over. But the innate part of us that God gave us to hear and be aware and to pay attention, if we listen to that, it will really guide us into a place of peace
and safety. Peace and safety. It will guide us to, and at times in my life, when I have ignored that gut intuition.
Oh yeah.
Is when I've gotten in the most trouble.
Yes. So let's talk about the kids.
Yeah.
I know they're all grown now, but how are we navigating them through this process? I know, do they have responses to what happened? Do you talk about what happened? Is something that you let them navigate? How are they navigating this?
So they were here. Okay.
Yeah.
They saw a lot, heard a lot, experienced a lot.
And they're boys.
And they're boys. And I'm their mama. Okay.
Right.
So, you know, I have had them in counseling. I have had, you know, they, as a trauma recovery coach, they see me teach all the time. They see me teach about boundaries. They see me coaching clients at home because I work from home and have clients all over the world. They're seeing and hearing and watching me as I'm going through my own healing process. And so my job and what I believe is beneficial to break certain patterns that come out of both family systems is to equip them with the language and understanding of what's a healthy relationship dynamic, what are appropriate boundaries for anyone, let alone parents, but anyone in relationship. And to support them as they're navigating, you know, this new situation where they have two households and there's a divorce situation, because it's traumatic for kids to go from having everybody, of course, in one place to now having to split time and split, have
vacations or
vacations and all, but they're doing really, really well. When you have your environment and there's peace in the environment. One of my children told me that it was hurting them, that the tension in the house, the lack of love that they saw in the house was very hurtful.
Wow.
And so now, you know, we're here and it's all love.
Yeah.
It's all love in this house. And it's all like me being there to support them as they're growing up and becoming young men. And that's my house. You know, there's different experiences everywhere, but I can only, I only have authority over what takes place here. And so that is the authority that I take up.
Good stuff. Good stuff. I'm so happy for you. I'm so proud of you coming through and making a difference now for other women. It's a job and we all have a responsibility, right? Once you come through and you have the ability to lead someone else into that same path of freedom, because it is definitely a journey. That's and right. Everybody has to walk it out, but with support, you can certainly get there. So yeah. I want to know if you had something to share about what you needed during that time that you did not get Um, if you can think back to
Mhm.
anything, whether it be a conversation, whether it be a number you could call. I mean, what do you think when you think about the fact that now that you're out, that you could have used as
Mhm.
something that you didn't have?
Um, I taught this in a class a couple of days ago. Every person who experiences domestic violence needs to hear one thing, and they need to hear it repeatedly. And they need to hear, "I believe you."
Yeah,
They need
yeah,
to be affirmed and validated for what they are telling people is happening to them that is abusive. They need the court system to step in and be a protector and follow what the law has stated, um, which does not always happen and
right,
doesn't frequently doesn't happen. Um, I needed understanding and language for what was happening to me, because psychological abuse messes with your mind,
yeah,
and I needed someone to help me understand what I was in and how I could respond in a way that would be that would free me. And so
yeah,
that's what that's the reason I became a trauma recovery coach, was to provide that for people. And I also needed community. I needed someone and a group
that
of
part.
people. I needed a group of people that understood what it was like to walk through this,
Yes,
who you didn't have to do a whole bunch of explaining about
yes,
things. That when you told them, they got it. And I
yeah,
needed people that when it was hard, I could reach out to them and there would be empathy and support and love and
yeah.
kindness. And I didn't have that either.
And you know
So,
what? And that is so, so key. And I will say that um, knowing that you don't have to explain, knowing that you can
yeah,
say it one time, because the amount of strength that it takes to even share it, only because you know it to be true, but you also know that it's so under the radar that
yeah,
you may not be believed. But for somebody to say, you know what, I believe you, and I don't care what it looks like. I have a couple of people, the producers, sending me things. Thank you guys for responding, by the way. Somebody said this story sounds familiar. Um,
it's
Cynthia, it
textbook,
definitely is familiar to
textbook.
a lot of people, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then Dee Dee says this is real talk. She felt that about 4.5 years ago. Satchel saying this has been very informative. You guys keep piling in the chat room, because this conversation is so necessary. And if you know anything about trauma, if you know anything, and specifically about domestic violence, it is your own private hell.
That's
If
right.
you're dealing with a narcissist, it's the worst thing ever. And it is just something that you definitely need, if you have just one person to
Mhm.
just believe you and say, I'm going to walk this with, I'm going to walk, walk through you, or walk through this with you, is so, so important. So I really appreciate the fact that you went and got the necessary counseling, the
Mhm.
necessary training, and that you're now, working with other people that have gone through and are going through the same thing, because trauma is definitely something that, like you said, it's affected your brain. It's affected. I can remember going back to my old house. This was several years ago, and walked through the house and didn't remember some of the rooms.
Yes.
I can remember saying, this room here? The room was, yes, the room was there, but
Yeah.
I don't even remember some of the things and some of the people, even from some periods of my life. It's just, I don't remember them.
And yet, there's a book called The Body Keeps the Score.
Wow.
Your brain may not remember it. Your mind memory may not remember it, but your body does. And that is why people have triggers.
Yeah.
That's why they have physiological responses, because you have a felt body memory of what took place. You may not have a cognitive memory, but your body keeps the score. And that was
So
one of the first books that I read in my training.
at some point, does or can your body forget?
What your body can do is it can process and release.
Okay.
Okay, the memory is going to be in your body, but the charge, it's called a traumatic charge, the energy that's associated that makes you respond like it's happening again or it's happening right now, that can be processed and released out of your body. So
And
that you
that
have the mental memory, but not the body memory of it anymore.
and is that once you have changed your environment, so to speak, for into a peaceful one?
It let me put it this way. And I one of the quotes that I say all the time is, you cannot heal until you are out of harm's way.
Okay.
So the first thing you do is you have to get out of the physical environment so that your body can do what God created it to do, which is heal and repair itself. But then there are other things, and it's like a fingerprint. For
Yeah.
some people, people are brought to doing modalities that are mental health modalities like EMDR, which is eye movement reprocess, desensitization, reprocessing. Some people do something called TRE, which is trauma release exercises that literally put your body in a position that helps release through trembling the somatic, the stored energy in your body. Some people go to do chiropractic work. Some people do healing yoga. Some people, I mean, there's all kinds of modalities that you can use to help support releasing and processing that traumatic charge from your body. Your body has a, it's like if you got hit by a bus and the impact of that hit your body, it's going to be in your physical body. And that's why people go to rehabilitation, and they have to do certain exercises to release that charged energy from your body. So the first thing you do is get to safety. And I actually have done a teaching. There are 4 seasons of recovery for every trauma survivor. The first one is a season of safety because your body is still in a place of fight or flight or activation. The second season is a season of stability where you start to have more moments of peace, but you're still very susceptible to being easily activated or hypervigilant or, easily upset. The third season is strength, when you start to have more peaceful moments, what's called ventral moments, than activated moments, where you're in fight or flight. And then you have a storytelling season, which is where I'm at, which is where you're at. Where you start to then be an advocate for people who have experienced what you did, and you start helping walk them out of and through the process of healing and recovery.
And what I will say about that is this walk for me has been intentional.
Yes.
Because I cannot afford, from an emotional place, from a physical place, from a mental place, from a spirit, I cannot afford to allow that to happen again, because I feel like what has happened has been traumatic enough, and I cannot afford to allow that type of trauma to repeat. And so I have to be very intentional about my relationships, about my communication, about even the jobs that I take, that they do not, I have to be intentional, and it's just my journey, because again, when you're in trauma, it's like this is your world and you have to protect it. I have to protect every single conversation that I have. I can't, it's that kind of thing that's intentional. And so that's why it's really important, because now I recognize how important being intentional is, that I help others come through that same place, because I didn't know and I didn't recognize if something happened, just let it happen. You know what I mean? That whole passive thing, you really have to be intentional about what gets into your peace space. Once you get to the other side of that, you don't really want anything else to disrupt that.
Well, for me, it'll send me to the hospital.
Yeah.
So I'm protecting my physical health, my mental health, my ability to do the work that I do and support the clients that I support every day, my ability to show up well as a mother. I'm supporting all of those things.
Yeah.
So I've had to leave a lot of relationships behind through this process. I've had to go no holds barred with anything that disrupted the regulation, the peace, and the healing that God was leading me to.
Yeah.
And I had to do so with almost a cutthroatness. Cutthroatness meaning I'm going to choose me over
Oh yeah.
anybody. I'm
Oh
choosing
yeah.
me over anybody,
I
because
can totally understand.
for the first time in my life, I'm not considering you first. I'm considering me first.
For the first time in your life, you choose you.
That's
For
right.
the first time in your life, and I got it. I understand that, and it's really something that, for me, my statement to myself was one and done.
Yes.
First time, I gotta go. I don't have the opportunity to keep talking about it, keep trying to convince you that I'm wonderful, keep trying to convince you that I'm honest, to keep trying. The first time, or if you've already been doing it, the very next time you do it, I'm one and done. I've got to be out. And so that became my mantra. And even though it feels like it only feels mean because I've never done it before, I've never stood up for myself before. But it's not mean when you think about other people who, when you ask them a question, they say, no, I don't want to do that. Now that I'm saying, no, I don't want to do that, I'm this mean person, but you've been doing it all my life.
Right.
You know, some of the comments, Dee Dee says, I couldn't understand why my nerves were so bad. I attributed it to my RA. This has helped me understand what my mind and my body was dealing with. I didn't think it was that bad. Peace is priceless.
Yeah. And, and that's such an interesting, most of the survivors that I work with have some kind of physical disease or chronic manifestation of illness, because your body starts to manifest the impact of what's happening in that domestic violence situation. It shows up in cancer. It shows up as some kind of autoimmune, like rheumatoid arthritis or fibromyalgia or multiple sclerosis or lupus, or, it shows up with, high blood pressure that you can't get under control. It shows up with constantly getting respiratory issues. I remember people saying, oh my gosh, you're so sick. You're always sick. My immune system was compromised all the time because of the stress that I was under.
Wow.
And I have to be extremely intentional, you use the word, about what I'm choosing every day in order for me to create an environment internally that helps support my healing. Period. Period. It's my life on the line. And when I realized, you asked the question, what was the thing that made you go, that's it? When I realized that my life was on the line, that this person didn't care about my life.
Right. Right.
I'm the mother of their children, and they don't care about my life.
Yeah.
I had to care about it. And then God was pouring out to me that Jesus died for me to have this abundant life. And I was living the absolute opposite. And I wanted it.
I think that
yes, go ahead.
That is so key about that person is trying to take your life. And even if you want to go into the spiritual place and say, the enemy used them, whatever, this thing is trying to take you all the way out.
The way out. Yes, all the way out. All the way out. And when you realize the person, the movie with Julia Roberts, Sleeping with the Enemy, when you realize the person in your house is the one actually drilling holes in your boat so that you can sink.
That's the part. That's the part. And I will tell you this, for me, the part that made me more or most afraid, I was not afraid of the individual. Mm-hmm. I was afraid because I let that person get that close to me. I was more afraid that I did not see something right in my face. That made me more afraid than, I was never afraid of him. But the fact that I was sleeping on him, meaning I slept and didn't even recognize it creeping in.
Well, what's interesting is what we really did was sleep on ourselves.
Whatever that was, I literally was so unaware.
Yes.
That part for me, and even now when I have friendships that I'm really intentional about my friendships since the breakup or since the marriage is over. I'm very intentional about deception. Sure. I'm very intentional about a person that's lying. A person that is not truthful. Even if you can't say, just say I can't say. But to find out that you have been at my table in my house spending the night, whether you're a guest or family, it doesn't matter, but you've been that close to me
Mm.
and you try to, in my mind, you literally are trying to take me out and I was unaware. That is more, that causes me more anxiety than a little bit.
Mm. I understand it. I understand.
Because you're already kind of side eyeing strangers, right? Because you kind of don't know them. But the people that are right in your camp that are doing that, I
Mm.
can't even tell you the level of anxiety that I have when I find out that a person has betrayed me and
Mm.
they've been in my house and they've been in my conversation or my space or what. I cannot tell you
Right.
how, girl, that is that literally makes me shake in fear because I'm thinking you could have taken my life. Like in my mind, I mean, I
Yeah.
know really they may not have, but you could have taken my life, my very essence of who I am, and you've been in my house and I did not know.
No.
That for
Yeah.
me, that's
See,
a one and done.
and this is what is so tragic. I'll say tragic and um, damaging about narcissistic and psychological abuse, because there is a calculated, strategic,
Yes.
intentional deception.
Yep.
There's a calculated, the person is preying on people.
Oh, they've studied you. They're studying
They
you. You're
case
not even
you,
studying yourself.
they've cased you, they've
Yeah.
studied you, and they're intentionally presenting information that's false to try to get you into a place where they can exploit and use and extract everything from your life possible.
Right.
That is a scary thought.
Well, that's scary. And again, you're not paying attention. If you are a person who you trust this person, they're in your space. You dialogue about what you're doing, where you're going, your habits, and things like that. And they've been casing you the whole time, waiting for you. Oh my God, that is like the worst. Let me read this comment. This is from Dee Dee saying, "Wow is right." Maria saying, "I firmly believe my current health journey truly was caused by long-term stress. I have always put others over my own health."
Yes,
And
that's
Edie says
called
it's important.
codependency. Codependency is the chronic self-neglect for acceptance.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
But
Yeah,
the good news is we can recover.
that's right.
And whether it's a slow process or a long process,
Right.
if we are intentional about recovering, if we are
Right.
intentional about recovering.
And it's funny
Really,
that you say that, because when a potential client comes to me and we have our consultation, I am listening for two things. I'm listening for whether or not they have gotten to the end
yeah,
of trying to make the situation work. And I'm listening to whether they're willing to do whatever it takes
yep,
to get to a place of safety so that they can heal. If those two things aren't present, we're wasting time and money. And I don't waste people's time and money.
and would you understand or would you agree that fighting against the enemy can sometimes be just as long as fighting for your own peace?
Oh,
It might be a harder fight,
absolutely.
but you have to fight just as hard for your own peace until you get to the place where it is just something that you just breathe every day. It's just a big of a fight to hold on to your own peace.
It is, and I talked tonight in my academy about standing firm, therefore. It is about you choosing to be steadfast with the decision that I'm going to create an environment through the authority that I have been given to make choices that supports me being a healthy, whole person.
Yeah.
I'm the only one that can do that for me.
Yep.
And I'm going to choose out of the authority I have been given with my free will to do.
Yes. It's an intentional choice every day.
Every day.
Every day.
Yeah. And I'm I'm willing to take out anybody.
Oh yeah.
Any person, any situation. I'm willing to remove anything that comes to disrupt that.
I'm with you on that. I am pinky swearing, partnering up, whatever it is. But yes, I'm with you on that. I'm with you on that. I do want to ask you,
Mhm.
just because we're getting to the end of our conversation tonight. First of all, I want to thank you so much. I thank you for your life. I thank you. I thank God for your life that you made it out. And I know
Absolutely.
that it was traumatic. I know that, as all of us know, the memories don't always go away, but
Right.
you fight for your peace. And so you've done an excellent job of doing just that.
Thank you.
So I am proud of you, little girl.
Thank
I'm
you.
proud.
I receive it. I receive it. Thank you so much.
I want to ask you, what would you like to share with our listeners tonight about, maybe if they want to get in touch with you? What do you tell me about what you're doing, that people, if they want to reach out, and we have all of your tags available
Yeah,
whenever you share.
absolutely. I am a one-on-one trauma recovery coach. I coach both clients and I coach coaches who are coaching clients. And you can find out more information about that on my website at thenarcissisticabusecoach.com. We talked previously in this discussion about the absolute necessity for communities of people who get it. And because
Yeah.
I didn't have that, I created one. It's called the Kimberly Weeks Freedom Academy, and that website is kwfreedomacademy.com. I teach every week on Tuesday night. I just got out of teaching for an
Thank you,
hour.
Maud, that she's
Yeah.
available.
I teach every week on Tuesday night, and we have a group Zoom session. We call it our soaking room, where we get together, we share what's going on in our lives, and then we talk about and we receive, just words of encouragement, prayer. We do all of that stuff on Thursday nights at the same time, and that's our schedule for the week. So if you're looking for a community of people and you don't necessarily want to have one-on-one coaching, you need an environment where you have people that can support you and you can build some relationships with, the Freedom Academy is a great place for you. And also for people who are looking like, hey, I might want to do something like this, and maybe you want to be a trauma recovery coach. I work with the International Association of Trauma Recovery Coaching. I am a supervisor, I am a teacher and facilitator as well. And that website is www.iaotrc.com. And you can become a certified coach as well if this is something that sounds like it'd be interesting for you to participate with as well. It is a calling. It is extraordinarily rewarding. And it is definitely a part of the purpose that I'm on this earth for. So I'm excited about it.
Very good. And I actually will probably reach out to you, because I really do. I'm actually interested in doing that. I really am. So I will certainly be reaching out to you myself, but I do have your email address information here, right? Coaching
Yeah.
at KimberlyWeeksCoaching.com. Kimberly, what I would like to say is that in October, in the month of October, I'm going to get a group of us together, and through the month of October, which is Domestic Violence Month,
That's
we're
right.
going to do, I haven't gotten the entire vision, but what
Okay.
I do know is that my friends and my colleagues that have something to offer, I want to either put that together as a panel. I want us to do something, little spots here and there, meditation, whatever that is. But I just, and you can help me brainstorm if you like, but I definitely, during the month of October, I want to bring all of us together in some capacity for that month. And we might do, like I said, spot checks or whatever, but to collaborate, to really provide an opportunity for women to experience what healthy and whole looks like.
Yeah,
Be
I actually did.
conversation.
I did a master class for some 20-somethings last weekend called Whole Girl Summer. And that's what we were talking about. We're talking about what it looks like for you to do your personal work so that you can be a whole person. Yeah.
Yeah. So I do want to, I will be reaching out to you anyway, but I certainly want to just charge you with brainstorm a little bit of that and see what that looks like for you. But in the month of October, if you just give me some space and let's collaborate on something to work with our community of
Yeah,
believers.
that
Yeah.
sounds good. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much for being on our show tonight. You have been a wonderful blessing. Let me just make sure we don't have any additional comments before I let you go. Somebody said, KG said, wonderful conversation, wonderful discussion. So people are definitely commenting. Ladies and gentlemen, certainly please share this podcast. Please reach out to Kimberly if you have any questions for her, if you have anything that you need her for. Certainly you can reach out to Another Woman's Story. You can reach out to us, share and like this page, share and like, I mean, we're all over the place. So our information is coming up, popping up on your screen right now. Certainly follow us and like us, and we'll be in touch. And Kimberly, it's been a joy. It's been a joy to have you tonight.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. I'm going to pop you out for just a moment to have some final words, and then we'll get right back to you, okay? Thank you again. Have a wonderful night. Bye-bye. Everyone, this has been a wonderful, wonderful conversation. As always, we have guests that are willing to share their story. If you are willing to share your story, please reach out to us. Contact us either on our Facebook page. You can contact us on Instagram. You can contact us by emailing or going to our website at anotherwomanstory.com. But it is our intention to continue these conversations, to create the dialogue that's going to make a change, and we'll save the life of a woman, one woman at a time, one story at a time. Thank you all so much for coming tonight. Love you, and we'll talk to you later.